Welcome to the Singleness of Purpose workshop of the first HA World Convention. Okay, this is not a meeting of Heroin Anonymous. The opinions expressed in this workshop are those of the speakers and not necessarily representative of Heroin Anonymous as a whole. So let's just get this kicked off, and I want to introduce today's facilitator of this workshop, Chris T.
Hi guys, hang on. Okay, thanks everybody for coming. I thought it would be a good idea to start this off with a prayer. I have found a set-aside prayer a very useful thing. Every time I do step work with somebody, we say some sort of a customized set-aside prayer. When I'm going to read something, I do some sort of little set-aside prayer in my head, and I can't think of a more appropriate workshop to do some sort of a customized set-aside prayer, followed by a little bit of silent meditation, just to give people an opportunity to relax and set aside everything they think they know. So I'm going to open with that. I'll lead us in a prayer, and then let's just do a couple minutes of silent meditation. God, thanks for this opportunity for us to all meet up here today. Thanks for the opportunity that you've given us to find this fellowship, find a new way to live, find people willing to help that know what it's like to feel the feelings that we have, which we used to think were so unique. As we take a look at this principle today, take a look at quite a few things, please set aside everything that we think we already know, all the areas where we believe we've reached the summit of knowledge, so that we can have an open mind. And please set aside any sort of fears that we may be having that would get in the way of our usefulness to each other today. Please help us all to be in the moment, to keep in mind that the purpose of this is to help each other, and help us to set aside all of the other things going on in our lives right now that might crowd into our minds and sidetrack us from being right here, right now, today, doing this one thing. Amen. Now let's just do a couple minutes of silent meditation. Okay. All right, well, thanks everybody for showing up. And if you joined me in that prayer meditation, awesome. My name's Chris, and I'm a heroin addict. And, hi guys. Are there any other heroin addicts here? Yeah? Anybody not a heroin addict that happens to be here? We got one. He's right there. Two. Okay. Who else? Oh, okay. Thanks for coming, you guys. I was asked to do this workshop by Charmin, and my very first reaction to that was like, I do not want to do that. No. I'm not getting up there. There's no way I'm going to do this. I want nothing to do with it. That's what was going on internally. And I talked with her about that a little bit, and I wouldn't make a commitment. I didn't accept it right away. I took it to a few different places. Of course, my own head thought. I put a lot of thought into it, and I took it to prayer and meditation, and I took it to my sponsor and a lot of other people, and started discussing it with people and spending some time in some self-searching, and came to the conclusion that I'd probably regret it if I hadn't have said yes. At first it started to look like this is going to be interesting, and then it turned into, what, this could be really, really freaking awesome. And so I went with, this could be really freaking awesome. And that's working for me. And I can just tell you, I've spent a lot of time trying to prepare for this. I've talked with, I don't know what a lot is to you, but to me, I've talked to a lot of people, and I've done a ton of reading and research, and more and more in my searching, I've gotten more excited about this, and the fear has at times escalated dramatically. And then all of a sudden, right around the corner, it's like, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be so cool, And so I was sure I was going to be extremely nervous, but I'm not feeling that right now. This is cool. So thanks for making me feel so welcome, guys. One of the things coming up with okay, well, I don't know how to do a workshop. I've never really done a workshop. What is it? I haven't attended a ton of workshops. Is this something where we're all going to be doing some work together? Is this me just sharing my opinions about something? Am I what is it? And all I can tell you is what it's turned out to be. And what it's turned out to be is me doing a lot of personal work myself. A lot of step work has come into play in my research, and asking myself a lot of questions, and asking a lot of other people a lot of questions about this principle, this singleness of purpose. And I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and at one point it was just going to be sharing what I've discovered, and then it was suggested, well, why not have a panel? Okay, so it's going to be a panel. Well, how's that going to work? Is it going to be a Q&A? And it's just, over these last few months, it's just evolved into whatever's about to happen right now. It was suggested by a couple people that I should just stay out of it and open up for a panel and let some other people share and just kind of organize it. And then the consensus of the panel was to share what I've discovered in my research. I've spent a lot of time and talked to a lot of people specifically about singleness of purpose, and not just people from HA, not just people from AA, not just people from other 12-step fellowships. I talked to people outside the 12-step movement. I've talked to people outside the recovery movement. I wanted to get as many perspectives as possible. And so our group conscious was that share what you've discovered, and have a panel, and have a Q&A, and open it up to the floor at the end. And so we're going to try to do all of it. So I've got a stack of notes like this. which I have tried to boil down, and that's been rather difficult. So the way this is going to go is just however it's going to go. I've discovered a lot, and I'm just going to go from the heart with this and not be too regimented about it. So with the help of some friends, I decided that a good format would kind of be sharing what I've discovered in my research on about this principle, and just using the same sort of timeline that we all use, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and so it was suggested that I start with some history, like let's inventory what's already happened. That's something we learn to do in the steps. It's the very first action step that we really take, is reviewing the past. And so I'll just share with you a little bit of what I've discovered in my own reading and what other people have shared with me, what's in print and conference approved by other fellowships, and just things I've discovered. I thought about it, well, okay, I can ask myself what singleness of purpose means to me, what I think it means to HA, what I think it means to another fellowship, or to just a basic principle for living life, and how I can apply that in my daily living. But what seemed pretty logical is to take a look at, where did this term even come from in the 12-step movement? This is an HA convention, and I'm a member of HA along with several other fellowships. But I've focused my energies on HA, and it's like, all right, well, HA didn't invent it. That doesn't come from HA. That came from somewhere else. And so it's like, well, I'm pretty sure that came from AA, And so, let's start there. And that is where I started, and I discovered some really interesting things. One of the things I discovered, one of the first people I was directed to talk to was somebody that was an avid researcher of the mutual aid recovery movement as a whole, not specifically the 12-step movement, but the movement as a whole, all of it. And I found out that the recovery movement started way before AA. AA was not the first kid on the block. And one of the things that this guy showed me was, how he had dated it back to the early 1700s in America, at least. And all these different movements that basically had the same intention that I think we do. And, the sad thing is a lot of them, they don't exist anymore. However, one of the things that was pointed out is that early in AA, they were taking a look at how are we going to survive. And they utilized the principles that are contained in the 12 steps to address that matter. And so they started researching what had already taken place. What didn't work, what were the failures, just like we do on inventory. And they started looking at other movements that were similar. And there was a whole list of things that were attributed to the failure of these past fellowships, and I'm not going to get too detailed into that. But one of them was that a lot of times these fellowships would get a little overexcited about some things, and they would get kind of sidetracked, and they would start, some examples are, getting involved in alcohol or drug reform. Things like prohibition and pro or con, alcohol is good or bad, or, drugs are good or bad, and how can we control it, and how can we, get involved with the politics going on in our country or around the world, and what can we do about it. And, some other things were, just getting involved, coming to realize, these basic spiritual principles that we learn, they apply to anything. And some groups got, really vocal about, we've got the answer to all problems. Rightly so. That's arguable that we do. However, a lot of groups lost their focus and it just kind of fizzled out. So anyways, one thing I discovered that I thought was pretty interesting was AA didn't invent the 12 steps, so to speak. We might have put 12 numbers on some spiritual principles, but those principles have always existed. They've never not existed. They've always been around, and it's always been fairly common knowledge to the world that, like, these basic principles are how you live life. It's common sense, And so this guy that was doing all this research, he did a lot on AA, and it's like, you know what, the 12 steps are not AA's claim to fame. It's not the 12 steps. In this one person's opinion, granted, he thought that AA would be more well known throughout history for its 12 traditions. So that's where the research started. And I can tell you that I feel fairly confident about doing this. I hope I'm not too confident, but this is why I feel confident. I have fought against the singleness of purpose, and I have fought for the singleness of purpose. One thing I was overlooking in both of those mindsets is the fact that I was fighting. At times I have felt very justified in fighting because I felt like I was either being heroic and protecting somebody that needed my help, or, that I was, just basically I would get a hero complex going. And I found out that's very dangerous for me. It feels so good, though. And so I feel pretty confident that I've got some experience on two ends of a spectrum. But what ended up happening is it broke me, really. It broke me. I kept fighting this way or that way, and I'll just switch from this team to that team, and eventually it wore me out and broke me down. And I'm really grateful for that process. My hope is to come from a place of looking at this objectively, not as an HA member necessarily, even though that I am, but trying to look at this from somebody that's not involved in a fight. And I don't think I need to explain to anybody that this is a subject that's often fought about and contested and argued. I mean, if you didn't know that, well, you're about to find out. One of the things that was interesting that I discovered was in AA, there was this guy, and he talked to this psychologist, and or maybe he was a psychiatrist. Carl Jung was the guy's name, and this guy was trying to help this drunk and really smart guy, really spiritual and scientifically minded, and somebody that I admire. And he tried everything he could to help this guy. And I believe he gave him all of the tools that he needed and all of the right direction, but it didn't work. As soon as this guy was on his own, he drank again, and he said, why don't you go check out some sort of spiritual movement and get involved in that, and hope that you get struck by lightning, basically. And this guy did, and I started thinking, because we often say, only an addict can help an addict, only a drunk can help a drunk. And I'm thinking, well, did the first guy that helped him, was he a drunk? Who helped him? So obviously it didn't start off that way. And it was like, oh shoot, does that mean we're wrong when we say that? But this is how it played out. This is what I discovered, at least, and this is my best understanding of what I discovered was it really took off when that guy, that first drunk that had a spiritual experience, tried to carry that message and just carry some simple, common, everyday spiritual principles to another drunk. And I was, when I very first heard about the first meeting of Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson, I was pretty surprised by that, because I found out that Dr. Bob was already practicing the program. He was a member of the Oxford group. And that's basically, where most people attribute our 12 steps to, was like the basic fundamental spiritual principles of daily living found in the Oxford movement. And Dr. Bob was already trying to do that, and he wasn't staying sober, And what happened was this other drunk guy showed up named Bill Wilson, and they started talking to each other, and Bill had already discovered, and trying to help people and failing to get anybody else sober, that one, he was coming across pretty strong, trying to tell people what to do and preaching to people, and he was like super mystical and telling all these like really far out stories about this white light and wind blowing through his body and all of this stuff, and it was freaking people out. And he went back to a doctor, and the doctor suggested, talk to him about the allergy and the mental obsession, and hit him hard with that stuff, and just share your experience with him. Just talk about your drinking, talk about yourself, and that's what he did with this one guy, and that's where it really took off. It was two guys talking about themselves, and it wasn't like one person above the other. It was just like, dude, check it out. Like, here's what I'm doing, and it's working for me. Here's how I used to drink. Here's how I used to do this. Here's how I used to feel inside. Here's how I lived life, and like it sucked and it didn't work, and like I got turned on to these spiritual principles, and it's freaking working for me, and like I really need you to listen to me right now so I can stay sober, and that worked. And, some people say that, that was really the only thing that was different than any other spiritual movement that's ever existed. Spirituality is a lot bigger than the 12 steps. It's a lot bigger than any particular movement. It's just always been, and I believe it always will be. It just, it just is. But these guys found something that really worked specifically for specific people very quickly and effectively. And it kind of took off from there. Now, I know that Bill Wilson has, is idolized and given a lot of credit for a lot of stuff, and I personally, this is an opinion. I'm not a big fan of making heroes out of people. However, I'm gonna talk about this guy a little bit. He made some predictions about what might happen to AA. And granted, this is just somebody's predictions, but I think it is coming from a pretty important source. And one of the things that he predicted was a possibility is he called what we have the new wine, okay? And one of his warnings was, let's not drink too deeply of this new wine. A lot of people have recognized the 12-step movement as a whole, and especially AA, as profound, and it's going to change the world. It's totally going to change the world, and I think it is. However, that's coming from somebody else from the outside talking about us. And this is just my best understanding of what Bill meant by that. And it's based on my own experience. Is I can get drunk on my emotions. Emotions are awesome. They're awesome. I feel pretty good right now, but I can get drunk on listening to myself talk. I can get drunk on my own belief system. And drinking emotions is one thing. That's fine. But getting drunk on them, then I'm no longer in control. And I do stupid things when I'm drunk, when I'm high. And I think that's just my opinion. I think that's what Bill was talking about, that it would be really easy to think too highly of ourselves. And something else and I've done that, I do that. I don't believe that I'm past that. I don't believe that I'm never going to do that again. I believe it's an ongoing, everyday, minute-to-minute process to take a look at myself and ask myself some questions and move forward. And one of the other things that was pointed out, I did a lot of reading out of this book, AA Comes of Age. It was recommended by other people to research this book. I've also done some research in a lot of other fellowships, a lot of stuff outside of the movement, but this was a really good source of some inspiration. And one of the things that was also kind of like a warning or prediction of what could lead a 12-step fellowship to the end, at the time, in the very beginning, AA was the only one, so there's a lot more now. However, one of those things that was talked about in this book was there's probably going to be two greatest enemies. There's probably going to be two things that could take us out. Nothing will probably take us out, but maybe something could take us out. And one of those things was false pride, and the other one was anger. And I getting involved in this, and one of the reasons I didn't want to do this workshop is fear of all the anger. I have never found a subject. No, I take that back. The subject of singleness of purpose, I've noticed there's a lot of emotion and anger wrapped up in that, and a lot of people feel they're right about stuff and that they're need to do something about it. I can think of a few other things, maybe politics and religion, where we could get into that, same sense of anger and debate. And, it's like, man, look at all the wars and look at all the hatred. I'm on this team, I'm on that team, and screw you guys, we're going to kill you, and, we're going to infiltrate you, and because we know what's right, we're just, full of love. One of the things, so I'm going to share a little bit about my false pride and my anger, okay? Because in doing this research, one of the attitudes I tried to take was, okay, you can't do this research, Chris, from a perspective of a Heroin Anonymous member. You can't do this research from the perspective of this or that, because you're not going to be able to be objective if you're doing that. It's the same principle that's why I need somebody to do a fifth step with. If I'm just inventorying myself or my group from internally, there's no outside perspective involved in that, and that doesn't work very well in my experience. So it's a principle that I got right from the steps. I need outside perspective, and so I'm going to try to do my best to research this without being too attached to, I'm an HA member, or, I'm an NA member, I'm a AA member, you know what, screw all of that, I'm just infiltrating you guys, and I'm going to show you what really works. I tried to set that stuff aside and just be open-minded, and what ended up happening was I started just it just turned into a step work project, really. I just started taking a look at where I have contributed to the controversy and fueled the fight and caused problems instead of bringing any sort of harmony. It just turned into a process of growth for me. And I want to thank Sharman for asking me to do it, because I am in a really good spot right now, and I wasn't when I started. And I attribute a lot of it just to learning how to be open-minded and take a look at stuff. And where have I had false pride surrounding this specific matter, and what has that looked like in my life? Okay, here's how this goes. When I very first got involved in the 12-step movement, and for just real quick, for any of you that don't know, there's hundreds of 12-step fellowships, hundreds. And they don't all word the steps the same. They don't all have the same purpose. There's all these different things. They all have very similar underlying things going on, but there's a lot of differences too. And when I first came in, I didn't know anything about all of this stuff. All I had was other people's comments to go off of and my observation of other people. And one of the things I heard when I was in treatment, and I'm not condoning this at all, but I'm going to tell you what I heard. People said, don't go to NA. There's no good sobriety there. Go to AA and just tell them you're an alcoholic, because that's where the long-term sobriety is, and they're the best ones, and do that, And I didn't question that. It's just like, okay, I'm just, all right. Without realizing it, and then I just started picking up on little things. Oh, those guys, they think this and they think that, and those people and those guys, and I don't go to those meetings because, and I do this because, and just all of this stuff, and this. Can you guys hear the underlying kind of condemning tone? Okay, well, I didn't know how to I didn't know I was even supposed to be looking for stuff like that. I didn't know how to read that. It didn't even register. I just believed people. I was just following the leaders, and whoever was talking the loudest, whoever seemed the most put together, whoever was the biggest and the strongest and seemed the most confident, I just listened to them, And what I didn't realize was I was inheriting everything that person was giving me, not just the good stuff, but the bad stuff too. And what I started doing was, I can remember hearing we don't go to those old timer meetings because those guys are just old and grumpy, and they'll tell you to shut up, and they won't let you talk, and they want to do it their way, and they won't let us, and kind of this, kind of immature, kind of rebellious attitude, and but I just bought right into it, and it was yeah, screw those old grumpy bastards, but I had never actually known any of them personally, or been to any meetings like that. I just jumped right into the first thing I was exposed to, and it's and so screw those guys, screw those bastards, grumpy old bastards, and I remember getting involved. It's we're better, and I remember getting involved in HA, and I was applying for a commitment at the local intergroup. And I remember I made a total joke out of it, and it was I wrote this resume, and it was I'm going to infiltrate HA as a whole. I'm going to, achieve the highest level of power, and I'm going to create a fellowship of pure heroin addicts, and real Nazi-ish, and I was being sarcastic. Okay, I was being really sarcastic, but I didn't understand at the time that underneath sarcasm is anger, and it was just a big joke to me, and I didn't realize how much anger I had inherited from these kind of comments about those people, those other people. And so I took this attitude in there, and I ended up getting to know some of the grumpy old timers. And my attitude changed. I didn't know them before. I didn't have a relationship with any of these older members before that seemed like they were Nazis or something like that. And I got open-minded, and those guys really ended up helping me. So that there was some false pride in there, and that I thought I was going to be the hero. I was going to go in there and straighten out these old grumpy bastards, infiltrate the system, take over, and us younger, nicer people were going to take over and do it the right way, without being open-minded whatsoever. So then I started to get influenced by these older guys, and I went to the opposite extreme. And I started, once again, I came from a place of making myself out to be a hero without really, it wasn't cognizant, it wasn't like necessarily verbal dialogue in my head, but I can look back and see it now. And it was like, holy crap, man, I've been closed-minded. Now I know more. I've got exposed to some truth and some history. I've learned what the traditions are finally, and it's like, oh my God, this is about helping people. And like, we're trying to create an environment, the one that sucked me into HA in the first place. I can remember the first HA meeting I went to, I'd been going to AA, and it was awesome. It was freaking awesome, and it was such good recovery. And I went to this HA meeting, and it sucked. It did. In my opinion, that was my opinion at the time. It was like, man, like it just it was a speaker meeting, and it didn't seem like that person. Like they were telling all these war stories and all of this stuff, and it was like, man, if I compare it to that more established group, like this is pretty primitive, man. Like I don't know. But here's the thing: that's what was going on in my head and my judgment. But you know what? That's not what I felt. What I felt when I went to that first meeting is like, this is freaking awesome. These are my people. Like I'm getting a little bit emotional. I try not to do that. It's embarrassing. But I really felt like I belonged there. I didn't need to like, okay, how can I, apply alcoholism to this? Like there was no like thought process. It was just like, it's HA and I belong here, and it was just blatantly obvious. I had struggled with, am I an alcoholic? Do I belong in AA? Like, even though like I was there and it was working, I struggled with that. It was not blatantly obvious to me. It just wasn't. It was like I was trying to learn how to be an AA member, and when I went to HA, I just was a member, and I just knew it, and like I just felt at home, and it was freaking awesome. And so then I took this attitude. Is there anything wrong with that? It sounds pretty cool to me. I can't find anything wrong with that to this day. But here's what I did with that. All right, I want everybody to have that opportunity. And if anybody dares to threaten that, I will take you down. I'm going to be a hero. I'm more loving and caring than everybody else. And I am justified to fight for this thing and fight hard. And God is on my side, And I will be given all the power needed to, win. We're going to win. Once again, I was doing the same thing. False pride, thinking like I have reached the summit of understanding. I know what the right thing to do is, and I am destined to to be a part of this movement. And we're going to fight. And we're going to make shit happen. Am I not supposed to cuss? I don't know what the rules are. I apologize. So I was thinking a little too highly of myself. And, of course, I thought I was doing the right thing. You guys, it was genuine. It was totally genuine. I felt I was doing the most loving, caring, responsible thing to do on either side of this controversial issue. And I was really scared to, ask people to not share at meetings. That's like probably the most controversial thing I've come across is at a meeting, and let's say we're at an HA meeting and somebody shares and they'd say, I'm not a heroin addict, but I want to share, and they start talking. It's like, okay, what do I do? Do I do God's work? And, do I need to overcome that fear and do the right thing? And, hey man, would you consider passing so we could hear from a heroin addict? Because that was important to me in the beginning. It was really important. It did create that environment. I just knew I belonged. I didn't need to understand anything. I just knew, just based off the name of the fellowship, that I belonged there, And so, do I defend that? Do I try to, enforce this? And I, at times it felt like I was doing the right thing, and at other times it was like, I'm not allowed to cuss, but you're being a fill in the blank, and it didn't seem quite right. And once again, I found that I was setting myself up to be a hero. I believed that I had reached the summit of understanding of everything, and it was my job to carry out God's will and force people to do something, And what I found is, once again, it doesn't matter. In my experience, I discovered it didn't matter which side of the fight I was on. It was the same problem, exact same problem on both sides. Whether I was fighting for this principle or against it, like, who am I to define this principle? But I found that, I've experienced a lot of false pride, and as a result of that, I started getting angry about stuff, and I found out a little bit about self-righteous indignation. That's when you believe that you're right, and maybe you have a lot of evidence to support that, and then you start getting angry about that when other people don't see it your way, and you feel justified, like there's injustice going on, and it's time to stand up, like revolution is on. And I've taken that attitude on both sides of this argument, if you want to call it. I want to share that. I want to share that with you guys because it broke me down. At some point, I started, in doing. I sponsor a lot of guys. I always have. That really works for me when things are going good and when things are going bad. I learn a lot when I sponsor guys. And one of the things I learned was like going over this actor scenario in the Big Book. That's the literature that I happen to use. I don't think that you have to use that, though. Use whatever you want. That's just what I typically use. And I'm looking at that, and it's talking about this delusion that people, spiritually sick people, have, that they can rest satisfaction, that I can force happiness and contentment if I can just manage the world well. If I can manage myself and manage you, then I'll be happy. And I just started realizing, like, damn it, I'm trying to manage everybody, and I just started, this whole thing just started to break me down. And I had been so wrapped up on this one single thing, and kind of discovered that I wasn't being very useful. And then it talked about being, I'm most useful when I'm open-minded, when I can show some respect to other people's opinions and perspectives. I also have learned a little bit just about the way my brain works. When I'm angry about something, I'm not using my whole brain. I'm using a very, very small part of my brain. And it's just like survive, and it's just a response to fear. That's all it is, every time. That's what anger is. It's a response to fear. And I just experienced so much anger wrapped around this stuff. And in researching this, it's just like all coming to light. Like, holy crap, man! Like, it turned into a personal inventory project. And it's like, well, how are you being? Like, maybe you are fighting for something good. But maybe if you just took the fight out of it, you would be more useful. And something else I discovered is you can get little bits and pieces of truth. You can research some history and find some truth. And what is really common, and I've experienced, I'll find one piece of truth and think I have all the truth. And now I'm going to share the truth with people, and like, this is the truth, And when maybe, I've read one little thing in some book or whatever, and I'm just one person with one perspective, and like, who am I to start preaching to anybody, And I started realizing that the only time I'm really in trouble is when I think I've reached the summit on some subject. I'm going to tell you what this means. I'm going to tell you what it's all about and how we should practice it and how we should do it. And like, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I just turned into a preacher. I totally just turned into a preacher, and that doesn't work for me. Maybe some people like it. It doesn't work too well for me when somebody's talking down to me and preaching and yelling at me, and I can hear that passionate anger, and it just turns me off. And it's like, okay, if I start getting to that place, something's wrong. If I'm trying to force happiness and force love and force tolerance and whatever on anybody, that's like an oxymoron. That doesn't even make sense. Who am I to do that? I'm playing God when I do that. And I've learned a lot about being open-minded when somebody else, at times I wanted to fight against it. I didn't even talk to the other side, whoever that was by my definition. Then I wanted to fight for it. I didn't even talk to the other side, whoever that was by my definition. And I only surrounded myself by people that were like-minded. There is no change in that formula. There is no open-mindedness in that formula. So what I've done is learned that some of the most useful people I can talk to are people that disagree with me. I found early on in AA that was the attitude of a lot of members. Like, AA got a lot of flack from the outside world, and somebody pointed out, like, don't be afraid of that. Like, they might be right. What if they're right? And I've found that that's the formula that's worked for me in any sort of tense issue or strong, rigid belief that I have, is learning how to take an attitude of like, wait, maybe I don't have this figured out. If somebody feels strongly about something, maybe they have a point about something. Well, what is it? Like, are we in this thing together? Are we trying to beat one another? Are we trying to compete with one another? Or are we all in this together? Are we trying to learn? Like, instead of, here's what you guys need to know, what do I need to know? Like, here's my best understanding. Like, do you guys see any flaws in that? It's the same principles I learned doing the steps, And so this is. I realize I'm not talking specifically about the singleness of purpose, you guys. I'm very aware of that, okay? But I'm sharing with you an amazing experience that I had researching this subject and being on one side or the other side of a fight and against them. And we're better. We're doing the right thing. We're working for God. They're working against God, and just this crazy delusional attitude. All it's done is open up more questions. And I've got a stack of paper basically full of questions. Some of those are, and I'm gonna wrap it up, and I'd like to hear what these guys have to say is, should HA have a singleness of purpose? What is that? I can just tell you my home group used to have a really strict format, like super strict. We thought we were doing the right thing. There was a group conscience on it. We thought we were doing the right thing. Well, we changed that recently. We had a member that wasn't a heroin addict. He was an Oxycontin addict, but he felt at home at our group. He was trying to go to some other fellowships, and he just said, I relate to you guys more than anybody else. I tried, and I like this meeting the best, and I really relate to you guys. And it was like, cool. There was a time where I would have been very threatened by that. He got sober in our group, and he didn't infiltrate the system. He didn't take over, delude anything. Like, it didn't disrupt that feeling of I belong. Now, if everybody in the group wasn't a heroin addict, that would be a little bit weird. Why would we still call it HA? And that's like one of the questions. Should we have all these different fellowships or just one great big one? The spiritual malady that underlies all of this stuff is common to anybody. Anybody could be an addict. Shoot, if being an alcoholic is I can't physically control it, and I can't mentally, on my own mental power, just not do it again, Well, what all does that apply to? Holy crap. Like, you could apply that to, like, spending too much on orange juice at the store. It's like, well, you're an addict, like, could you physically stop yourself from doing it? If you could, you would, and if you want to make a decision not to buy that brand of orange juice anymore, why can't you just make a decision and stick to it? You're an addict, right? Like, it's like, you can apply it to anything, if you look at it that broad. But would that take away if we just opened it up that much, like, and just had one giant, just spirituality fellowship? Would that take away from anything, from that feeling of being able to share a specific experience with somebody, being able to say, I used to buy that orange juice too. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop myself. And once I got started, man, I just kept buying orange juice, and like, I really wanted to stop. I genuinely wanted to stop, and I couldn't do it. It's like, me freaking too, and it's got that pulp in it, that's like so good. And like, there's like this magic that happens when somebody can match your physical experience. And then all those emotions come out and you connect emotionally. But the first thing that was matched was the physical experience. Like, did you actually do this too? Do you know what the hell you're talking about? I'm different than you. You don't know what it's like to be in my shoes. I'm different. And I found out that we can actually turn that into an attribute. And so, like, where do we draw the line? How narrow, how broad do we make this? What are we going to call ourselves? If it should it be Opiates Anonymous? I'm open to that. I'm totally open to that if it makes more sense. What about Narcotics Anonymous? Narcotics Anonymous, I learned all about NA recently. Like, they're freaking awesome. And like, their singleness, they have a singleness of purpose, but it's different. It's just any sort of drug addict, and narcotics apparently used to mean opiates, but now it's like a generic term and it applies to a lot of different drugs, and anyways. But so, like, it's just, all of this research has opened up a lot of questions. How can we best fit ourselves to be of service to the recovery movement as a whole, to the world as a whole? Where are we going to be most useful as a fellowship? Not of service, but of maximum service. And so, personally, I think it's something I'd love to see people start talking about it. I don't know if other 12-step fellowships talk to each other, but like, I've started to wonder, like, why not? Why, like, should we have some sort of, like, maybe this is already happening, I don't know, but like, should we have some sort of like United Nations or something, like, where we get, no, really, where we start talking about stuff like, wait a minute, how can we work together? What's all this separation thing? Like, are we, we're all like talking crap about each other, and we're the best because of this. We're the only fellowship that does it this way, and we're, like, we're the only one that's this loving. And it's like, wait a minute, man. Like, instead of putting each other down, why don't we start talking about some stuff and inventory it? And ask each other, where am I off track? What do you think? And just take a different attitude. And that's what I've been learning how to do. And anyways, I've probably talked way too long. I've got so much stuff, you guys. I could probably write a book. And I didn't get to share but a fraction of that. And I'm going to open it up to some other people that I asked to share today, and it's all people that I respect. Some I'm not close personal friends with, but I love all of these guys, and they've all been a part of my life. And then we're going to open it up to the floor. We're going to have some questions and answers if you guys have any questions for any of us. And I know people, some people let me know that they were specifically coming here because they had some things they wanted to say. And I don't want to try to stop anybody from doing that, man. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about some stuff. So, the first speaker is going to be Chris. Chris G. I've known from the beginning. Chris got sober in HA, and I think is an outstanding member. And I have seen him do a lot of things to help our fellowship. And I take Chris as a pretty open-minded person. I enjoy my conversations with him, and I can have just like a level discussion with him, and that's one of the reasons I chose him. So I'm going to open it up for Chris. Thanks for letting me rant, guys.
My name is Chris. I'm a heroin addict. If I speak at this volume, Marion, can you hear me? Okay. First of all, I just want to thank Chris T real quick. He really did a huge amount for this, and I very much appreciate this. I think this sort of discussion really unites our fellowship. Before I start talking anymore, I want to preface anything that I say in two ways. So, first of all, in sobriety, I've been sober for 7 years and a few months, and in sobriety, there have been many times where I realized that the way I lived and the way I thought were based off of lies. And then I changed the way I live and the way I've thought. And because of that progress, I think I've been able to stay sober and be of service to you and to God. And therefore, so I don't know if that discredits anything I say from here on out, because it could change immediately. I also think that I have had approximately 7 hours of sleep in the past 3 days. And I think that they say that that's like somehow the equivalent of being drunk. So, no. Don't worry, I don't feel drunk. All right, where to begin? I've thought about this a lot, and I see people here in this crowd that are from St. Louis. I see people that are from the Valley here in Phoenix. I see people that are from California. I see people that are from Cleveland. Geez, I'm sure that I'm missing people, but I see a lot of people here that are going to be able to go back to their respective groups and share this information with. In addition, we're recording this so that we're able to provide it to the fellowship, so that other people can start thinking about it. And that leads me into this, is that this sort of communication is what is going to allow us to survive as a fellowship and give us that longevity. What I'd like to explain a little bit first is some about the structure of some 12-step fellowships, and specifically a little bit of a comparison between Heroin Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a member of both fellowships, and first, in Alcoholics Anonymous, for those of you who are unaware, sort of the structure, our service structure, is this upside-down pyramid. So where you have these groups at the top who have the final say in the decision-making, and then below them are these different tiers, and they sort of go something like regions, areas, districts, sub-districts, down to some kind of world services type entity or something like that. And very similarly, Heroin Anonymous is structured after that, except for we are missing all of those middle tiers because we're a much younger fellowship. One of the challenges for Heroin Anonymous has been to figure out how to start making those kind of like area group consciences, and I think that at World Services that we're doing that a lot right now, figuring out those sorts of problems. But the point is, ultimately, this is a group decision. A lot of people have come to, okay, so just to give myself just a few, I guess, credentials. I'm a member of Heroin Anonymous World Services. I'm the chairperson for this convention. I've been sober for a little over 7 years. In Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been fairly heavily involved with service. I've had the opportunity to go through some traditions workshops and that sort of thing. More importantly, I've had the opportunity to apply those traditions. And only then were those traditions useful to me and the groups of which I was a part. So, that being said, I think I have this a little bit more, I guess, clear view being involved in both Alcoholics Anonymous and Heroin Anonymous of where maybe we can go in the future. So, let's see. So first I want to say I appreciate how Chris was talking about encouraging us to find out in other ways. So here's my experience with Singleness of Purpose. I came into Heroin Anonymous, and I came into other 12-step fellowships, and in very few meetings, I saw people that were asked to not speak. They got up and said, just like Chris said, I'm not an alcoholic, but blah, 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 and then they were asked not to speak. And I think that probably has only happened to me. I've only seen that maybe 3 or 4 times in my life. Another thing that I've noticed, I've heard more of those sorts of experiences almost the closer that you get to Akron, Ohio. I just noticed that. I know that in this area here, in the Phoenix area, we're kind of based a lot more off of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have adapted more of those sort of perspectives of the 12 steps. I've also noticed that on the East Coast, I'm from Virginia, and I spend a lot of time on the East Coast. I've also noticed that Narcotics Anonymous is very popular there in many cities, and many of those people adopt those. And I think that's very interesting, and that's one thing to take into consideration when we're talking about a subject as sensitive as Singleness of Purpose, and because there are so many varieties of opinions when it comes to that sort of thing. I'd like to go over some examples that I found, because when I came in here, I was like, very similar to Chris. I was like, you know what? Singleness of Purpose shouldn't exist. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to join Heroin Anonymous World Services, and I'm going to abolish Singleness of Purpose. I was serious, real serious about it for like 4 days. Yeah. And somebody challenged me. They said, well, why don't you do some homework on it? Why don't you research it? Because I thought that what I knew was correct, and that, looking back, is entirely my ego thinking that. And the more I looked into it, the more I started getting these different perspectives on Singleness of Purpose, and the more I started sort of understanding why Singleness of Purpose exists. And I was able to, a little bit easier, set aside my egotism and just see what worked for other people. And in many situations, and I think there's people in this room that can agree with me, in being of service to Heroin Anonymous, there have been many cases where we have made decisions and entirely regretted them, and then thought to ourselves, why didn't we just look to this other fellowship for that answer? It was right in front of us the whole time. And today, we do that. And it saves us a hell of a lot of trouble. A hell of a lot of trouble. So I think that's extremely valuable. In looking into those other fellowships, I want to share some sort of examples that I found useful. There are many more examples of this sort of thing, but one of the examples that I found was there was a Grapevine article in 1983 that talks about how one lady. Excuse me. I want to read this to you. I'm glad we got this PA up here, Charmin. So this is a delegate that's at an AA area meeting, and she says, so in Alcoholics Anonymous, a delegate is somebody who represents an area by going to New York, and they do this sort of very large meeting once a year. And this lady says she's bringing this information back to her area and explaining her experience when it comes to Singleness of Purpose. And she says, and this is referring to the dual addicted person, my group allowed me the dignity to choose to change these things and the freedom to do so when I could, not when they thought I should. My group seems to have no trouble sticking to our Singleness of Purpose, which is to carry the message to the still suffering alcoholics. However damaged and confused they are in the beginning. There is a fine line between upholding our Singleness of Purpose tradition and limiting or restricting our membership. The day AA appears to be rejecting people who may be alcoholic, we will begin to die. What good will it do us if, while we are defending our rights, AA is destroyed? And I think that's a very good example of how just one group, at the very top of that inverted pyramid, dealt with the Singleness of Purpose issue. Keeping in mind that that group has that final word. In 1957, so Bill W. has done a few different sort of Singleness of Purpose talks, and some of them are written, some of them are recorded. And in one of the recordings, Bill W., he spends some time supporting the singleness of purpose argument that we have to stick to that it's extremely important. And in all of those different talks, in all of those readings that I researched, I found that in every single one, he ends it by saying, but the group has the last word. So it's very important to notice that, because we've had so many, at Heroin Anonymous World Services, we've had so many people that come to us and say, what's the right answer? And I would argue that there almost is no right answer. I would argue that the group's conscience is the right answer. Recently, I was at an AA area conference, and that area consists of the state of Arizona. Lots of different groups are represented there. One of the things that the delegate said that she brought back from this very large conference in New York was that Alcoholics Anonymous is divided on one issue. Guess what it is? Singleness of purpose. We've been, Alcoholics Anonymous has been in existence since the 30s, and still it is divided on the issue of singleness of purpose. I don't think, I would be so surprised if our fellowship came to a place where every single one of us was in agreement. But the reason that these 12-step fellowships work is because the groups have that power. And our individual groups can make those decisions. And our individual groups today are able to have that power and still get along with one another. So here's what I've seen since I got sober. Since I joined Heroin Anonymous, things were a little bit weird when I joined Heroin Anonymous. There was a lot of controversy over singleness of purpose here in the Valley. And I'll be honest with you, it's not like that anymore. And I've been trying to think to myself, why? Why is that the case? What happened? What changed? Did people's opinions change? And not that I've seen. We haven't, come to some decision yeah, this is what's right. It hasn't been like that. What's happened instead is that we have grown together, I think. We've grown together spiritually. We've grown together in sobriety time. And we've come to a place where we accept each other's opinions. And I think that right there is what other groups that are represented here now will experience as time goes on. Thanks for letting me talk.
Thanks, Chris. Next, we're going to hear from Chuck. I've known Chuck for a number of years. He's somebody that I respect, and once again, somebody that the conversations I've had with have almost always been really level-headed, and I can have just an intelligent conversation with Chuck, and so I'd really like to hear what he has to say. I know he was involved in HA from early on, and so let's welcome Chuck.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chuck Parkhurst. I am a heroin addict. Apparently, I've been told I am the cranky old bastard Chris was referring to. I didn't know that. I didn't see that. I didn't look in the mirror today. First of all, how many people are here from out of state? Raise your hands. That is so cool. That just gives me goosebumps. It really does. That is just so awesome. Just because Chris talked about it, I am my clean date is 12/21/03. I have been involved in Heroin Anonymous since the fall of 2004. A few months after Heroin Anonymous was started, I've been involved in the service structure, active in sponsorship, H&I work. I've been a GSR for my home group. I've been a district committee member at DCM. I have been a secretary for my home group. So I've been around Alcoholics or Heroin Anonymous for a while, as well as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I do know a little bit about the service structure. When Heroin Anonymous started, Mike S. asked Paul F. why there wasn't a meeting for junkies. And he said, that's a good question. Why is it there? And so they decided to start one. and the first meeting was held on August 12th, 2004, and that anniversary is coming up right around the corner, and there was a dozen or so people there, and the fellowship was born, and I'm going to circle back to a couple of things that Chris shared in regards to singleness of purpose, and I'll be real honest with you. I'm going to share some opinions as well, and when this fellowship was born, it wasn't much different than when the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous was born. And when AA was born, there was it was birthed from a movement called the Oxford Group. And when Abby, from the Bill story in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, when Abby went to see Bill on that day in November, and they sat down at Bill's kitchen table, and Abby was glowing, and Bill looked at her and asked him what happened, and Abby said, "I found religion," and something was different about him, and Bill looked at him, and Abby didn't do any ranting, and he had found the Oxford Group, and the Oxford Group, Bill got involved in the Oxford Group, and something had changed, and they started, converting drunks. And what happened was the Oxford Group didn't like the fact that they were having separate meetings with drunks, and there was a group of drunks that were just working specifically with drunks, including members of the Oxford Group, and they were called the Alcoholic Squadron, and the Oxford Group didn't like that. So you can imagine when they split off and they decided to start their own group, this small group of, imagine like a small group of drunks in a little life raft, and if one more person got in there, this thing was going to tip over, and they were all going to drown, and they were all going to die, and they were really worried about that. So if someone got in there that wasn't a drunk, it would cost all of them their lives. So they were really, really careful to make sure that the people that they worked with were just drunks. And when Heroin Anonymous was started, they were really, really careful to make sure that the people that they worked with were just heroin addicts, because they were in the same position, and it was small, and it was fragile, and there were 2, 3, 4 meetings, and there were 20, 30 at the most heroin addicts. And anything could have tipped that little life raft full of heroin addicts over. And there wouldn't have been any Heroin Anonymous, let alone any World Convention 10 years later. So that singleness of purpose had a very, very important meaning then. And you've heard a lot of opinions shared today, and it's an important thing to consider. And it is a really strong subject, and people have strong opinions about it. And I don't know at this point whether or not it's something that affects Heroin Anonymous as a whole, because that's the ultimate question that we're here to talk about today, and that you guys are here to talk about, because this is as much your workshop as it is ours. You're going to get a chance to decide when you go back to your groups and your service structure to decide whether or not to let people that are not heroin addicts, whether that's opiate addicts or crystal meth addicts or alcoholics, share at meetings, whether or not that affects HA as a whole, and make that decision for your groups. But it's nice to have the dialogue. It's nice to have you here. It's nice to be here. It's an honor to be a part of this. I would say I'm humbled, but I never am humbled. But it's sure great to be here, and it's great to be a part of this thing, and I'm glad I got a chance to share. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chuck. The next person that we're going to hear from, oh, and by the way, I realized that I had rambled way too long, and I didn't want this to be cut too short because I'm really curious to hear what you guys, what questions you might have or comments you might have. And I just got word that we actually can keep going until 2 o'clock. Is that right? Okay, so we can go a little bit over. All right, I was kind of sweating it, and I apologize for that. The next person that we're going to hear from, though, is Steve A. And I thought that would be a good idea because Steve is somebody that has believed in HA from the beginning and been a part of quite a few committees, world services. He's helped a lot with this convention, and he's not a heroin addict. He's a member of another fellowship, another 12-step fellowship that believes in and supports HA. And so I thought, man, who better to have on this panel? And so let's welcome Steve.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Steve Amelot, and I'm an alcoholic and an addict. The only difference that I have is that I probably didn't do enough heroin to become physically addicted to it. I did all the other things. When I got out of treatment, I went to a aftercare facility, and every week the litany of things behind my name that I was addicted to grew and grew and grew. You know, when I started talking about being a gambling addict, when I started talking about being an alcoholic, when I started talking about being a sex addict, about being a sex and relationship addict, when I started talking about food addicts, you know, I could qualify for all those things because I had done it one time or another to the point that I was psychologically addicted to it. I just hadn't done enough heroin to become physically addicted to it. Congratulations, first of all. You know, I get to watch this fellowship grow up the way that it has, and I believe that so much of it is dependent upon that first tradition. The steps are the same for all of us. We just put a different word in there for what we're powerless over. But those traditions are the things that help this group to grow and to carry their message, no matter what the message is. My Cocaine Anonymous group that I was in, I tell you what, we carried a lot of mess for a long time. And it was so bad for a long time here in the valley that people that were in that fellowship would go long enough so where they could get over the jonesing that they experienced from their coke, that they'd go to AA to get their recovery. And we watched the fellowship never start to grow until one time a couple of people talked about, why don't we make our Singleness of Purpose really about just being recovered? And that's what we did with CA. We had a Singleness of Purpose. It's widespread and it's sometimes really dangerous, but I loved what I heard when I heard that Heroin Anonymous was getting ready to get started. When Paul talked to me about being part of the first board, I had a lot of experience as a world trustee for that other fellowship. I had a lot of experience as a delegate. I know what the service structure is like. I know how the group conscience is supposed to work. But when I got that invitation to be part of something that is so vibrant and so much needed as HA, I jumped at it because I wanted to see it become something that would really, really help the heroin addict that's still suffering. Bottom line, that's what it's for. No matter where I go, it's about trying to help that addict to not have to suffer anymore. And you know why? Because it told me in the book that we all use, it told me in the book that practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with others. I want to stay sober. Believe me, I want to stay sober. You want me to stay sober. You do not want to see me on a Saturday night when I was out there. God, I hope I don't owe you any money. But the thing is, when Chris called me and asked me about this, I thought, what a great opportunity to be able to tell people that I love what I'm seeing in HA. I love the fact that they have this nucleus that's based upon something that I don't know anything about. But they believe in it. And they're strong with it. And that strength is going to make it last 10 times 10 more years. I got sober, AA was 50 years old when I got sober. I got to watch, God, a whole bunch more years. 25 more years of watching AA get bigger, watching CA become established. People don't run away from CA anymore, but they come over here because they have their heroin addiction, and they need to be able to talk to somebody about that. That physical addiction that comes from heroin use. Most cocaine addicts don't know anything about it. Most meth addicts don't know anything about it. I think I like heroin addicts second only. No, I like heroin addicts most. You know why? Because when they come in, they're all still in the la-las, and I'm a speed freak, so I can go fast and be in charge of everything. But tweakers just fascinate me. So I get to be part of all of that. But see, when I come into an HA committee or the World Service Board forum, I hear the heartbeat. I hear the heartbeat that makes this thing something that's going to be so vibrant. 10 years we've got this convention. 3 days, 2 days, 3 days. You have the actual 10th anniversary from that first meeting. Wow. Wow, that makes my heart sing. And I heard last night that there was an incredible number of people who had registered for this convention. Incredible. Congratulations to all of you. And if you have a question about your Singleness of Purpose, talk to the person next to you. Don't gossip about it. Talk to her about it. Get their feedback. Find out what it is. We did that set-aside prayer to start off with because I want to find my truth. I want to find out what is going to make me believe that I'm being honest today. I can honestly say thank you very much for letting me be part of this. And thanks, Chris.
Okay, thanks a lot, Steve. Now, we can go a little bit over. It is 1:23 right now. I'm going to keep track of the time, but one of the things that I've been looking forward to is hearing what kind of questions people have and what comments you might have as well. There's some pretty good questions that have turned up as I've looked at this, like, does there really need to be an HA? We've already got all these other fellowships that technically cover heroin addiction. Like, do we even need to exist? But anyways, let's open it up now. Anybody that has any questions for the board members or anything that you feel led to contribute, we're going to open up the floor. Right here.
Doug, the Heroin Anonymous from Southern California.
Hey, Doug.
And the question is for Singleness of Purpose. Where does that fit with the fifth tradition on there? If our primary purpose is to carry the message, the heroin addict who still suffers. Where does that fit as far as including or excluding other addicts or creating that open
Well, I mean, I could share my opinion that that seems to be a pretty big controversy, yeah, but I'd like to hear if anybody would like to tackle that question from the board. It's a great question. If you guys want to jump in, I'll go ahead and speak to that, and then if you guys want to consider jumping in as well. This is my best understanding, looking at Alcoholics Anonymous, mind you, okay? That it's fairly clear that they have, it's a third tradition thing too. There's one requirement for membership, but there is a requirement, and it's alcoholism. It's a serious drinking problem, as it's put in the 12 and 12. And our one primary purpose is to carry the message to heroin addicts. So the only thing that I've come across that the real question is not if you're a heroin addict and this and that, but do you have any experience with heroin? Are you a heroin addict specifically? Would somebody say, well, I've never done heroin, but I'm an overeater, I'm an addict. Like, we've got the addiction in common, and the spirituality in common, just no physical experience in common. What do we do? And I mean, based on AA, the literature is pretty clear. Like, we don't want to exclude any alcoholics, but we're not attempting to save the entire world. And in doing that, other fellowships sprang up. Now, spirituality, I believe, can save the world, and it is, but it's not just one group of people. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just what I've seen. Like, do you literally have experience with heroin addiction, not just addiction? That would, our purpose is to help heroin addicts.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a Singleness of Purpose guy, and I and this is my opinion, Singleness of Purpose to be executed relies on strong chair people, and a chairperson needs to have the willingness to step up and say, hey, if you're a crystal meth addict, we're going to ask that you don't share at the meeting. That's the format in a lot of the meetings in Phoenix, or at least it was, especially at the beginning, and it continues to be at a lot of the meetings now. So in regards to the fifth tradition, it is to carry its message to the heroin addict who still suffers.
So in going with that, have you noticed by executing that and doing that, that creates some strength in your group, some real core foundation by doing that method?
It does, but it also creates some controversy because there's going to be people in this room that don't like that. I mean, from my experience, but my opinion is that's an important core value in Heroin Anonymous. There is, as Chris mentioned, where do you draw the line? Do you want overeaters or gamblers or debtors anonymous or emotions anonymous and you want 200 other anonymous people in HA or any others? The way I was raised was if I go to an AA meeting, I identify myself as an alcoholic. If I go to a CA meeting, I identify myself as a cocaine addict. When I go to a Heroin Anonymous meeting, I identify myself as a heroin addict because I relate to and suffer from all three.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm from San Diego, Southern California also, so I don't know Jennifer when you're gonna.
Hey, Jennifer.
But we don't really care if it's social there too much. I don't know, but we always talk about a solution. Like, there's supposed to be a solution to the problem that we have, and I'm not sure if this is making more problem than solution. There's a part in chapter 2 of the AA book where it talks about like the camaraderie and and how we feel so close knit together because we have a problem that lies here, not in a name. I don't know how I can qualify separating the problem that I have up here. The problem I have up here is that I can't cope with life normally, and I have to put a substance in my body to do that. And so when that triggers my reptilian brain to want more, and to not, how do you call when you call that in there? I don't call it a heroin addiction. I don't call it a crystal meth addiction. I call it an addiction. So how do you qualify that when you are trying to find a solution for people who have a problem?
I've got answers for all of this stuff, but I want to give other people an opportunity.
Chris, heroin addict.
Thanks, Chris.
I wish that I disagreed with you. You know, I really do. I have plenty of friends who were chased away from Heroin Anonymous because they were asked to stop speaking at the podium and things like that. However, in looking more into other fellowships' experience, I've also seen that yeah, we can welcome that person in right then and there, and we may be able to help them right then and there, but in some sense, it's a detriment to our fellowship and how it survives, and its ability to continually survive. And that is really what I have found.
Is to keep.
Right.
Okay, I saw this hand first right here.
My name is Brett, and I'm a heroin addict. Hey, Brett. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, and you know, personally, what we've done is we followed the Singleness of Purpose pamphlet to a T. And the only reason we really did that was because we had no other information in the world. Because we're in Alabama. I mean, we're so far from here. That's what we built on. And we qualified it as, you know, to have that desire to stop suffering from heroin addiction, you have to accept heroin. And I understand what you're saying, that it's a decision each group should make. That's how the service structure should be made. So my suggestion, my comment is, you know, that the fourth tradition says each group is autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or HA as a whole. And what I would suggest, because I know everyone else I've talked to on the East Coast, it seems in the same boat, that we're hundreds of miles from other HA groups, and it's so hard, and I know you guys have flooded out, is to, if your answer is, it's a decision to be made with each group, let that be known. Find some way, I know it's very hard, I mean, we've only had contact with the world for about a year, and we've existed forever too. Find a way to put that message out. It is up to your groups to decide and define what this means. And I think you're doing a great job by having this, by putting that information out there. But everyone I've talked to, I think every group I've talked to, they hit the same problem with this issue. They don't know how to define it. Or our friends in Georgia were unaware of it. They started a group, then they became aware of it, and all of a sudden they're like, well, now we have half our trusted servants aren't even heroin addicts. What do we do?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
You know, so that would be my suggestion, is find a way on the website or whatever to put that out. It is up to the group to decide.
That is a great idea. I'd second that. And just to put it out there right now, that's something that I happen to be on the board with World Services myself, along with Chris and Steve in the past. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to encourage groups to do, like, please communicate. You know, we're trying to make that easier and better, but it's as simple as if you have access to a computer to, you know, like, let's get some dialogue going. Let's, you know, and so I would encourage that for many members. Did you have a question?
I'm Melissa. I'm a heroin addict.
Hi, Melissa.
Basically, since HA is so new, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Chuck, about, you know, stopping people when they're talking. But for me personally, and for, you know, we're from St. Louis, and it's pretty new there. It's only, what, 3 years, 3.5 years? And I have 2 years and I'm called once clean. So when I came in, there wasn't many people that had a solution that shared. And when they people. But now, I think that, you know, but now I love my AA home group also, but yeah, I really think it's about solution. And, you know, the person that started HA is St. Louis, and, you know, he's never done heroin. I didn't know that. Did I need to know that? You identify, yes, I'm so-and-so and I'm a heroin addict. That's all I need to know. What is your solution? I don't care if you've never done a drug in the book. If you're sharing and working out, you know, sharing the solution that we share, I think that's what it boils down to. But that's, yeah, the whole who can share and who shouldn't. I like what you said about everyone uniting. I think that's brilliant.
There's another avenue that can come out of all of that. I was asked to speak at a meeting in Hawaii, and I shared my story. And I shared my story about cocaine taking me to my knees. After the meeting, the gal came over to me and says, you know, this is an AA meeting. I said, yes. She says, well, there's some guys sitting over on the bench over there. They talk about drugs over there, so why don't you go over there and talk to them? But you know what happened? Is we started a new meeting over there. It was the first CA meeting on the islands. It became an H9 meeting that we were supplying out of Sun Valley Intergroup here. So it gives you an absolute opportunity to take it somewhere else if you're asked to move to the meeting, to talk about it somewhere else.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, you had raised your hand first a little bit ago.
John, Heroin Anonymous, San Diego.
Hey, John.
I mean, we request that people, when they share, limit their sharing to their experience. If they're not an opiate addict or a heroin addict, to limit their sharing. That's so. But we're open to anybody. And as a result of that, as a result of people coming in from other fellowships that didn't have, they spread that message to heroin addicts they knew. And new meetings have spawned from that.
That's right.
So this is, you know, if our goal is to get the message out there, then whatever means by whatever means necessary. You know, keep certain goals in mind, but keep the overall picture in mind also.
Thank you. And we're going to need to wrap it up. I'll take one last question or comment there.
I'm Brendan. I'm a heroin addict.
Hey, Brendan.
It's great to be here. And I just wanted to share my personal experience with Singleness of Purpose. It was first in another fellowship. It was in AA meeting I was at. And I had maybe a day or two sober, and I just stood up and introduced myself and said that I was a heroin addict. And after the meeting, someone came up to me and said, "Oh, that's great, but guess what? There's this other fellowship for you to go to. This is, you know, a group of heroin addicts, so let me take you to that meeting." So it's interesting because I can see both sides of this argument in that one experience of they were sort of enforcing their singleness of purpose and saying, "Hey, look, this group isn't maybe for you, but there is this other group that we can take you to get you help." So, you know, they were open enough to be willing to hold my hand and take me somewhere where I can connect with other heroin addicts, which is the other side of the argument for me, that early on when I was still trying to kick dope and get sober, relate to people that had some times in sobriety, I needed that. I needed to talk through, like, you know, wow, like, you know, this is how I felt, and have them say, "Hey, yeah, you know, I was puking and sick and for days, and it's miserable, and, you know, Suboxone, this and that," just relating on a level where I could become alcoholic. And those things become, for me, less and less important as time goes on, the longer I'm sober. And now I'm kind of at the point where I look at the tradition and I look at the term of singleness of purpose, and I try to reconcile singleness of purpose with each group has like one primary purpose. And I don't know, for me, when I read primary purpose, it kind of implicitly says something else that maybe there are secondary purposes. And that raises questions to me of what might those be. I'm not sure. I'm not really an expert by any means on tradition, so maybe the long form of that tradition would speak to that, but that's just my experience.
Thank you. And guys, I need to wrap it up because they need the room. I want to thank everybody for participating. And if if anything was accomplished here today, my personal hope is that like it's going to get some people talking about something, not preaching, not yelling, just discussing, and so. Yeah, Steve said no gossip.
We're gonna find a way to get this recording out to everybody that we can in the fellowship so they can have this information.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. So thank you guys. Okay, Charmin's signaling me to wrap it up. So why don't we close with a prayer? Joe S., I'm sorry.